The sun had just begun its lazy descent beyond the horizon, painting streaks of gold and crimson across the endless sky. Captain Mira Hayes adjusted her headset and glanced at the altimeter. 30,000 feet. A routine flight, routine altitude, routine everything, or at least that's what she had believed. For years, she had flown these planes with precision, knowing each gauge, each hum, each vibration as if it were an extension of her own body. But something was different tonight. A subtle vibration under her fingertips told her that the aircraft wasn't entirely in harmony. Asterisk. She murmured, eyes scanning the cockpit instruments. Her co-pilot, James, a steady young man with a calm demeanor, noticed the twitch in her eyebrows. Asterisk. You okay, Captain? He asked. Asterisk. Just a small shiver, Mira said lightly, but the words felt empty, even to her. The plane was quiet, eerily quiet. Not the quiet of a smooth flight, but the quiet of tension, of something waiting, of danger she couldn't yet name. Asterisk, then it happened. Asterisk, a warning light blinked on the left. Engine console. Blink, blink. Then it stayed on. A thin trail of smoke appeared in the engine camera feed. James stiffened. Asterisk. Engine failure, he said, his voice a notch higher than usual. Asterisk. Myra's hands gripped the controls instinctively. She knew the procedures, the drills, the checklists they had practiced 100 times in simulations. Yet now, faced with a real emergency, her mind raced faster than her fingers could move. She keyed the radio. Mayday, mayday. This is Flight 713, left engine out. Requesting emergency assistance. The response came, but it wasn't reassuring. No airport for miles, the controller replied, their voice strangely calm for something that should have sounded urgent. The nearest runway is over 200 miles away. Asterisk. Myra's stomach sank. 200 miles. At 30,000 feet, with a disabled engine and fuel already showing signs of stress on the instruments. It wasn't just far. It was impossible. Asterisk. She looked at the digital map on the console. Mountains stretched below them like the jagged teeth of some giant, sleeping beast. Rivers curled like silver ribbons in the fading light. There were no open plains, no emergency airstrips, nothing flat enough to risk a landing. Asterisk. The cabin behind them was quiet for the moment. Passengers slept, read, or stared absent-mindedly at their screens, unaware of the drama unfolding hundreds of feet above. But that peace wouldn't last. Mira knew it, and James knew it. Panic wasn't something that could be confined to the cockpit forever. Asterisk. The plane shuddered again. It was subtle, almost teasingly gentle, but enough to remind them both that the aircraft was no longer fully in control of its own flight. Mira adjusted her course slightly, keeping the plane level, monitoring the fuel, calculating, anticipating. Asterisk. She activated the radio again, voice steady but tight. Flight 713 to a TC. We need immediate instructions. Confirm nearest emergency landing zone. Asterisk. Nearest suitable landing unavailable, a TC repeated, almost monotonously. Terrain is rough. No assistance until you reach your alternate destination. Asterisk. Myra exhaled through her teeth. She glanced at James. His hands hovered near the controls, ready but hesitant, trusting her but also silently questioning. The tension in the cockpit thickened, heavy as the clouds surrounding them. Asterisk. Minutes passed. Maybe seconds. Time had lost its normal rhythm. The hum of the functional engine was the only sound she could truly focus on. Every beep, every flicker of a gauge, every subtle vibration of the cabin told her something she already knew. This was no simulation. There would be no instructor breathing down her neck, no safety net. If she failed, it wouldn't be a failing grade, it would be catastrophic. Asterisk. Captain. James began, his voice quieter this time. What are we going to do if we can't find an airport? Asterisk Myra's gaze didn't leave the horizon. The mountains were growing larger, more intimidating as they approached, and the river below snaked through the terrain like a potential lifeline. She could almost imagine the plane hitting the earth, twisting metal, fire, screams. Her stomach churned. But she didn't allow panic to take hold, not here, not now. She was a pilot. This was her moment. Asterisk, we adapt, she said finally. We don't panic. We make this work, whatever it takes. Asterisk, the hum of the remaining engine thrummed through the cockpit floor like a heartbeat. The plane trembled once more, reminding them both that nature and physics were not negotiable. Mira adjusted the throttle, recalculated their glide path, checked the fuel flow, and scanned the sky for anything: birds, other aircraft, anything that might indicate a possible landing option. Asterisk, as the sun dipped further below the horizon, shadows crept across the cockpit. The mountains ahead became dark silhouettes, their peaks sharp and unforgiving. Mira's heart beat in time with the plane's engine. She was completely alone at 30,000 feet, with no airport for miles, facing an impossible situation. And yet, despite the fear, a small spark of determination ignited within her. Asterisk, she didn't know how they would land or where. She didn't know if they would survive. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty: she was going to try. And that decision, that choice to fight against the impossible, would define everything in the minutes to come. Asterisk, the sky was wide, darkening, infinite. The plane was wounded, the mountains waiting below. Mira tightened her grip, adjusted her headset, and whispered to herself, Asterisk, we will make it. We have to. Asterisk, and with that, the real fight began. Asterisk, the hum of the single working engine was no longer comforting. It was a cruel reminder of what they had lost. Every vibration, every gauge flicker made Captain Mira Hayes' heart skip a beat. She and James worked in near-perfect synchronization, running through emergency procedures they had drilled countless times. Yet each step felt like walking a tightrope over a bottomless chasm. Asterisk, fuel readings? Mira asked, her eyes scanning the panel with methodical intensity. Asterisk, James leaned forward, checking the gauge again. We're losing pressure faster than expected. At this rate, we have maybe 20 minutes before we're gliding, not flying. Asterisk, Myra closed her eyes for a brief second, imagining the plane without its engine, the passengers unaware of the descending danger. 20 minutes. That was all they had. 20 minutes to keep 200 souls alive over a wilderness that offered no forgiveness. Asterisk, she opened her eyes, and they caught the jagged outline of mountains piercing the horizon. The sun had vanished completely, leaving a darkening canvas streaked with bruised clouds. Shadows stretched across the cockpit, making the instrument lights glow like tiny lifelines. Mira's fingers moved over the controls, adjusting, calculating, anticipating. Each correction had to be precise. One wrong movement and the descent could become a disaster. Asterisk, the radio crackled, pulling her attention from the instruments. Asterisk, Flight 713, Sappho. Do you read? The controller's voice was calm, almost too calm. Asterisk, yes, we read you. Current status, left engine offline. Fuel decreasing rapidly. No immediate landing options, Mira responded, her tone measured but firm. Asterisk, copy that. Estimated glide distance insufficient to reach nearest airfield. No assistance possible until you reach your alternate, came the reply. Asterisk, Myra's stomach twisted. Every sentence from a TC was like a countdown ticking in her mind. She didn't have miles to spare. Every mile flown was a mile closer to the unknown. Asterisk, James spoke quietly, almost to himself. What if we can't make it? Asterisk Myra didn't answer immediately. Her eyes swept across the mountainous terrain below, the river winding through valleys like a silver lifeline that might one day become their salvation or their grave. The thought of facing death in this way, at 30,000 feet with no control over fate, was a weight she had never fully felt in her years of flying. Asterisk, we adapt, she finally said, her voice low but steady. We find something to land on, anything, and we survive. Asterisk, but even as she said it, the truth gnawed at her. There was nowhere suitable. The mountains were unforgiving, the forests dense and dark, the river winding and narrow. There were no fields, no roads wide enough, no flat stretches long enough for a safe landing. Asterisk, the minutes stretched painfully. They weren't just minutes, they were lifetimes measured in heartbeats and decisions. Mira adjusted the glide path once more, factoring in wind, gravity, and altitude. She recalculated speed, trajectory, and descent rate in her head faster than any computer could. The numbers were relentless, precise, and unforgiving. Asterisk, altitude? She asked again, scanning the instruments. Asterisk, James reported quickly, 28,000? 27. Descending steadily. Asterisk, each 1,000 feet lost made the mountains below loom larger, sharper, more threatening. She could almost feel the jagged cliffs reaching up toward the aircraft, ready to rip it apart if she miscalculated. Her fingers tightened on the controls. Every adjustment could mean the difference between life and death. Asterisk, she glanced at the cabin camera feed. Passengers were beginning to notice something. Small murmurs, a collective unease. Some were standing, others clutching their armrests, eyes wide, masks of fear slowly spreading across their faces. The hum of panic was beginning to build in the cabin, an invisible weight pressing back toward the cockpit. Asterisk, Myra's mind raced, weighing possibilities. Could they glide to a river? Could they attempt a forced landing on a mountain slope? Each option carried enormous risk, each one terrifying in its own right. She knew that hesitation could be fatal, yet rushing without precision could be equally deadly. Asterisk, then she spoke, voice cutting through the hum of the engine and the mounting panic. James, we have a window. A small one. We need to find a path, a strip, a flat area, or the river. Anything. Start scanning now. Asterisk, James nodded, scanning the terrain with trained eyes. There, maybe. A clearing. Not long, but maybe long enough? Asterisk, Myra leaned forward, squinting. The clearing was narrow, surrounded by dense trees and rising rock. It wasn't an airstrip. It wasn't safe. But it was something. And right now, something was the only option. Asterisk, prepare for potential impact, she instructed, voice calm but firm. Brace for turbulence and rapid descent. We're going to try. Asterisk, the radio crackled again. ATC's voice, calm and distant, reminded them of the stakes. Flight 713. Do what you can. Godspeed. Asterisk, the cockpit was quiet except for the thrum of the working engine and the adrenaline pumping through their veins. 20 minutes. Maybe less. And they had only one chance. The countdown had begun, and with every passing second, the impossibility of their situation became more real. Asterisk, Myra's eyes fixed on the dark horizon, on the sliver of hope that might just save them. She didn't know if they would make it, but she knew one thing with unshakable certainty. She would not give up. Not now, not ever. Asterisk, and somewhere deep inside, a whisper of determination surged through her fear. Steady and unyielding, they were still flying. And as long as they were flying, there was still a chance. Asterisk. The clearing was small. Too small. A sliver of flat earth wedged between jagged rocks and dense forest. The river curled dangerously close, shimmering faintly under the moonlight. Mira's eyes narrowed, assessing every inch of it, calculating every possible trajectory in a split second. It wasn't an airport. It wasn't even a safe place to try. But it was a chance. And right now, a chance was all they had. James's voice was tense, barely a whisper. That's really the only option? Myra's hands tightened on the controls. It's the only chance. And we're taking it. Brace yourself. She felt the weight of hundreds of lives pressing down on her. The passengers behind the cockpit, oblivious to the precise calculations she was running, were about to become witnesses to something they never imagined. Panic could spread in seconds, but panic wouldn't help them now. Control, focus, and courage would. She adjusted the throttle carefully, coaxing the plane into a controlled descent. Every movement mattered. Too fast, and the plane would overshoot the clearing. Too slow, and the altitude loss might make the trees an inevitable enemy. The plane shuddered as the failing engine fought against gravity, reminding them that it could all end in fire, steel, and chaos. Altitude? Mira asked, her voice low but sharp. James's eyes flicked over the instruments. 18,000. 17. Descending steadily. The ground grew larger in the windows. Shadows of trees stretched like claws, reaching for them, testing their resolve. Myra's jaw tightened. She ignored the tremor in her fingers, the rapid pulse in her temples, the voices of doubt whispering in her mind. There was no room for hesitation. Get the cabin ready. She instructed calmly, though the words carried the gravity of a command for survival. Passengers need to brace. Prepare for impact. The intercom crackled. Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a minor technical issue. Please remain seated and brace yourselves. We will be making an emergency landing shortly. Her voice was steady, but her eyes never left the tiny clearing below. It wasn't just a strip of land, it was a corridor of hope threaded through danger. Mira tilted the plane slightly, adjusting for wind, compensating for the failing engine. The glide path had to be perfect. Misjudged by even a few degrees, and the plane would be shredded by rocks and trees. James swallowed hard, gripping his controls. I can't believe this is happening, he muttered. Mira didn't answer. Words wouldn't save them now. Only action, only precise, calculated courage could. The plane lurched as turbulence hit, tossing them like a ragdoll. She fought to keep it steady, correcting minute deviations with practiced reflexes. The clearing was close now. She could see the tree shadows racing past the windows, the glint of the river, the jagged cliffs threatening to devour them. Prepare for landing, she said softly, almost to herself. And then, louder, she said the words that solidified her resolve. I will land this. It wasn't bravado. It wasn't hope. It was fact. She had the skills. She had the experience. And she had no other choice. Mira carefully lowered the plane's nose, aligning with a tiny patch of flat ground. Every instrument beeped, every gauge flickered, but she didn't let her eyes stray. The wind buffeted the fuselage, the plane shuddered, but she kept her hands steady, her focus absolute. The passengers sensed it. A collective shift, a tightening of grips on armrests, a rise in heartbeat they couldn't control. Fear and anticipation merged into a single, electric pulse that filled the cabin. The plane wasn't just descending, it was diving into the unknown. Guided by one unwavering will. She could see the trees rushing closer, the rocks looming like jagged teeth. The clearing was shrinking rapidly in the windshield. She adjusted the flaps, careful, gentle, precise, coaxing the aircraft to hug the ground without smashing into it. The plane's belly grazed the tops of tall grass, scraping and rattling, but it held. Asterisk. Keep it steady. James shouted, gripping his side of the cockpit. Asterisk Myra's eyes were locked on the horizon of Earth, not on the fear or the chaos. One false move and it would be over, but her hands were steady, her mind sharper than ever. She guided the plane inch by inch, like a surgeon guiding a scalpel through danger. Asterisk finally. With a grinding screech of metal against earth, the plane touched down. Trees scraped along the sides, rocks tore at the fuselage, but the aircraft remained intact, rolling forward as it slowed on the uneven ground. Every second felt like an eternity. The river flashed by, close enough to make her stomach leap, but she kept control, coaxing the plane to stop, and then it did. Silence. Not the calm silence of a night flight, but the stunned, trembling silence of survival. The plane had stopped. No one screamed. No one panicked. They were alive. Asterisk Mira exhaled, the words finally leaving her lips. We made it. Asterisk James slumped back, white-faced, shaking. I can't believe we're alive. Asterisk Myra looked out the window at the wilderness surrounding them, the small clearing that had saved them from certain disaster. She didn't smile. Relief was a luxury, but she felt it deep inside, the undeniable, unshakable truth. She had landed this plane against all odds and brought everyone aboard back from the edge of death. Asterisk, and somewhere, deep in her chest, a quiet voice said, Asterisk, this is what it means to be a pilot. The plane was still. The engines, one barely functioning, were silent now except for the occasional hiss and groan of cooling metal. Mira Hayes sat in the cockpit, hands still gripping the controls, though their purpose had vanished. Around her, the wilderness stretched in all directions, dark forests, jagged cliffs, and the glimmer of the river that had become their unlikely savior. Asterisk, for one heartbeat, there was nothing. Not a word, not a sound, not even a whisper from the passengers in the cabin. The plane, battered but intact, seemed almost miraculous, resting on the uneven earth as if it had grown there by sheer will. Asterisk, then came the murmurs. Soft at first, cautious, like tentative footsteps. A mother's voice whispered, Is everyone okay? Another voice, younger, shaky, asked, Are we alive? Asterisk Mira exhaled, slow and deliberate, letting the adrenaline drain from her body. Her eyes swept the cockpit, then out the windshield, taking in the improbable scene of survival. She had done it. Against every calculation, every warning, every grim probability, they were still alive. Asterisk James turned toward her, pale and trembling. Captain, I don't even know what to say. That was, his voice broke. Words failed him. Asterisk Myra shook her head, forcing a small, wry smile. Don't say anything. Just let them breathe. Let everyone breathe. Asterisk, she keyed the intercom, her voice steady but soft. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Hayes. The plane has landed safely. Remain seated and calm. Emergency crews are on the way. You are safe. Asterisk, there was a pause, a collective intake of breath, a shift from disbelief to reality. Slowly, the cabin began to release the tension that had held it captive for hours. Tears welled in the eyes of many. Hands that had been gripping armrests tightly now unclenched. Passengers looked at one another, wordlessly acknowledging a shared miracle. Asterisk outside. The darkness of the wilderness felt oppressive, but within that small bubble of the plane, there was light, a fragile human light of relief, gratitude, and astonishment. Mira sat back, letting herself feel the exhaustion pressing down like a physical weight. Her hands trembled slightly from the effort of keeping the aircraft steady, from the fear she had forced herself to suppress. The first sound of engines in the distance, the unmistakable roar of rescue helicopters, cut through the silence. Lights flickered across the treetops, searching, scanning, arriving. Mira's heart lifted. Help was coming. Safety was coming. Soon, rescue teams arrived, moving quickly and efficiently. Paramedics checked passengers, guiding them out of the aircraft carefully. Some laughed, some cried, some embraced strangers in a surge of uncontainable emotion. A man who had been pale and silent all flight wrapped his arms around his child, both trembling, both alive. Mira watched quietly, the weight of relief pressing into her chest. She had saved them. Journalists and rescuers would later call it impossible. Experts would dissect the flight, the landing, the terrain, and call it miraculous. Pilots would study the incident for years to understand how someone could make that landing at all. But Mira didn't care about accolades or analysis. She cared about the people. She cared that they were breathing, that they had hope, that they had life. James approached her, hand trembling slightly as he rested it on her shoulder. "Captain, I think you just redefined what's possible." Mira smiled faintly, almost tiredly. "We redefined it," she said. "All of us." The passengers gathered around the plane, some staring at the forest edge, some at the river, all at the miraculous landing strip that had saved them. They whispered to one another, tears and laughter mingling, recounting moments of fear and courage. And all the while, Mira remained in the cockpit for a long moment, reflecting, breathing, feeling the gravity of what had just happened. She thought of the calculations, the instruments, the turbulence, the impossible glide path. She thought of the moments she had felt fear and doubt and how she had pushed through them. The memory of speaking aloud, "I will land this," brought a small, almost imperceptible smile to her lips. It wasn't just a statement, it was a promise she had kept. As the first responders began guiding passengers away, Mira finally unbuckled her seatbelt. Her legs felt like lead, her muscles trembling from the tension of hours spent at peak alertness. She stepped out of the cockpit, into the night, and looked around at the wilderness, the river, the clearing. The plane, battered and scarred, rested like a fallen warrior. And around it, hundreds of people, alive and shaking but smiling, stood together in awe of what had just occurred. Mira took a deep breath. The adrenaline had passed, the danger was over, and for the first time in hours, she allowed herself to feel what she had achieved. Not fame, not recognition, but something deeper, the absolute certainty that she had done everything she could to save her passengers. And in that quiet, extraordinary night amid the dark wilderness, Mira whispered softly to herself, "I said I would." The words carried no triumph, no relief, only truth. And for once, that truth was enough.